So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create this protein docking animation. It has a random functionality coming down, so the proteins are all docking at different times. Then we have our hero protein set. And so we'll do this all in Cinema 4D using the MoGraph system and do a little bit of touch up in After Effects when we're finished. The project files are available in the description, and check out some of the other files while you're in there. Let's get to it. Here we are in Cinema 4D 2024, and I'm going to create my cell surface for our protein docking animation. And to do that, I'm going to use a plane. And I'm just going to tell this plane to be a little bigger. I'll make it 800 by 800, and let's go ahead and give it quite a few divisions. We'll just do like 150 in each dimension. So if we hit NB, you can see that's the sort of divisions we're getting. And A will take us back to this position. And I'm going to use a couple, actually 4 bend modifiers. I could do it with just 2, but I like to do it with 4 just because it feels a little bit more organized to me. So I'm going to take a bend modifier, put it in here. We're going to say X plus, and we're going to say fit to parent. I'm just going to scale this one down in the Z dimension. So it's 400, so it'll be half of our width, and then I'm going to move it so it's just at the end here. I can use my coordinate system and make this exactly minus 200. And then I'm going to take, so this bend modifier or deformer is going to allow us to bend it like this. And actually, because I think I want to change that, I'm going to make this positive 200. Because what I want this one to do is curve this way. All right, so I want it to be able to curve downward from the center. And we'll just do something like 20 degrees to start with. So this is what we have right now. And what I'm going to do is use 4 bend modifiers to give us a curved cell surface at the top. And this keeps us from having to work with something like an entire sphere, right? I can just use this simple planar surface. So I'm going to take this bend deformer and just duplicate it by control dragging it down. And I can do a couple of different things here. I could change the dimension, but you notice it doesn't actually do anything. I could change the dimension and say fit to parent again, and then it's going to actually do it, right? And then I have to change the size. So I could go through all of that, or I could just take this, rotate it 180 degrees, and then move it using the coordinate system to minus 200. And now I've got a perfect arc. And what's cool about this is now I can take both of these, control dragging them down. So I've got that duplicated. I just have to rotate this now 90 degrees with both of these selected. And now I've got this complex curve created from a collection of bend deformers. And what's cool about doing this way is now that I've rotated them all, they all have exactly the same settings. And so I can just change. So I could simply create a hemisphere, right, if I wanted to. So I have complete control over how much dome curvature I have on this sphere using those bend deformers. So just a nice way to create a quick cellular surface that I can now like zoom into in my animation and later on. So that's step 1, creating that cellular surface. And I'll just go ahead and label this as cell surface, if I could spell. This is going to be a very generic, sort of abstracted version of protein docking. So I'm going to make a simple protein that doesn't actually represent a real protein. And for now, let's just create something simple. So I'm going to create a cube, and we'll go ahead and make it quite a bit smaller. I'll do 20 by 20 by 20. And actually let's make it 20 by, that's fine. We'll keep it there. I'm just going to make a very, very simple one. Let's hide our cell surface. Let's open this up and hide our editor versions of the deformers so we don't have to keep looking at them. And now I can make my cube editable by hitting C on my keyboard or hitting the Make Editable button here. And I'm going to use my extrude function and just select this polygon using polygon selection tools. I'm going to hit D on my keyboard, letter D as in dog, and click anywhere outside of my object and drag to the right. That's going to pull it up. So I'll do that a couple times. I'm just kind of going for a simple sort of cup-shaped protein surface. So I'm going to make this bigger, hit D, extrude again, and now I'm going to hit I to do an inset, and I'm going to inset that down to the center, hit D again, click and drag down, and then now we've got this simple sort of cup shape that's very cubic right now. But as soon as I put this into a subdivision surface by holding down Alt and selecting that, now we have this very cup-like shaped surface. And this is going to represent our protein on the surface of our cells. If you decide you wanted everything to be a little wider, you could select all of these polygons and use the scale tool to sort of like widen everything up a little bit. So you can make additional changes like that after you've done your modeling. I want to be able to have simple protein, and in this case, I'm just going to use a sphere to represent the other protein that's docking into this surface. And so let's create a sphere, and I'll give it 64 divisions and make it a hexahedron and make it quite a bit smaller. I just want it to fit inside of this little, almost looks like an egg cup. So I'm just positioning this down so that it looks like it's fitting in there correctly. Maybe I'll make it a tiny bit smaller. Great. And from here, what I want to do is I want to allow my initial protein. So our cell surface will be sitting here like so. Our proteins will be populated across that cell surface. And we're going to see this secondary protein coming in and resting inside its position there. But I want to have some sort of, conformational change to the cell surface protein. So I want this to change a little bit when it accepts the protein. So I want to create a simple animation to do that. And what I'm going to do is make some modifications to my protein now. And so I'm going to change the subdivision surfaces down to 1 on each one of these. And then I'm going to hit C to make this editable. And we'll call this surface protein. I'm going to label my sphere as docking protein. Okay, so the first thing I want to do in the animation part is to actually make this protein come down and dock. And to do that, I'm going to need a lot more keyframes. And so we'll have, let's say 450 frames. And I want this to take quite a bit of time, so I'm just trying to get a sense for time. How long do I want this to take to dock? I think about, let's say at frame 200, it's going to be completely docked. So let's go ahead and open up the dope sheet so we can see our timeline, and we'll zoom in here so we can see what's happening when we make these keyframes. So at frame 200, I'm going to have my protein actually docked in its position. And a little bit before that, maybe I want this to kind of take a few frames to seat. So let's go a few frames in, and we'll just move it up slightly so that it's outside. And I'll play that. So yeah, that seating sound seems pretty good to me. And before this time, I want this to feel kind of random, but I also want it to come in sort of vertically from the top. And so what I'm going to do first is zoom out here, and at frame 0, I'm going to have our docking protein be way up here, like outside of the frame almost. Right, so now we've got this protein coming in kind of slowly. That's good. It's stopping a little bit and it's seating, right? So if I zoom in to this spot, you'll see that it's coming in kind of quickly and then it's slowing down. And that's what I want to have happen. I want it to come in pretty quickly and then slow down. I might go ahead and edit the actual seating here a little bit. So let's pull up our doc or our dope sheet. I'll open up position and I'll open up the Y. That's the dimension that's animated there. Select that frame. And then I'm going to hold down Control and then just drag this point out a little bit further. That'll just slow it down so that it actually slows down a little bit more as it's coming in right there. And you can see it's even got a little bit of overshoot in there because I dragged that out so far. I love that. And so this is a way to edit your curves without having to actually go into the curves. But of course, if you wanted to go into curves, you could using the F curves here and zoom in a little bit more to see what's going on. And this is why we're seeing that overshoot, right? Because this is actually the angle that's happening. So that overshoot is like when this comes down, it's coming down, it's going a little bit below Z depth, and it's coming back in and seating. I kind of dig the way that feels. So yeah, that's editing the curves, but quickly editing curves you can do in your dope sheet just by opening up each individual component there. So pretty nice. Let's go ahead and close that up again, and I want to keep my Y animation speed to be pretty much the same the whole time, but I want to come in and modify things slightly in the X and Z as it's coming down. So just make it a little bit more wobbly so it's not so perfect. So let's do that. Let's have our coordinate system open for this. And we'll just animate X and Z only. So I'm just going to say X and Z, move it out a little bit, keyframe both of those. I think I did that a little too much, so maybe I need to straighten it back up around here, put it back to 0 and 0. All right, so it's there and there. I think I can move that a little closer. So because I'm not changing the Y, the speed vertically in our animation is staying exactly the same. So that's kind of cool, right? I think I want this one to be a little bit less dramatic too, so I'm just going to go to that keyframe and let's do more like 10 and 10 and frame that just a little bit off. Cool. And I'll do that a couple more times. Right, so maybe we'll go the opposite direction here, out about. I want to do much more than 20, I think. So I just want it to have a little bit of wobble as it's coming down, so it doesn't feel too, perfect and uniform. And we're going to be zoomed in quite a lot, so a lot of this isn't even going to be seen. I just like to add a little bit of variation in there. Okay, so we've got our protein docking. Let's go ahead and make a change to our protein on the cell surface. So I want to sort of mimic a conformational change. So when a molecule actually changes once a protein connects to it, right? There'll be some sort of physical change. And so I want to use a bulge deformer on my protein surface just to have it open up a little bit while it's docking. So let's do that. So I'll get a bulge deformer. I'm going to make that a child of my surface protein, and I will tell it to fit to parent. And so this just makes things wider or smaller, skinnier, right, based on the location of this guy. So what I want to do is take the bulge now and just move it up. So it's going to be towards the top here, so that while it's opening up, it's basically just opening up the top of this. So we have control now of this shape in this way. So I'll set it to 0. And as our protein comes down, we're going to have it go from 0 to open up a little bit, maybe about, I don't know, 12 or 15. This isn't going to be very dramatic. And then we'll come down and put it back to 0. So just a nice, simple animation. And then our next step is going to be to populate this protein over the, or this protein docking animation over the surface of our cell. And so I've got two choices now. I can either make this all a little smaller. I'm feeling like it's too big for this cellular surface that I created. Or I can make my cell surface bigger, which is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to select cell surface, hit T for scale, and just scale it up, maybe like 400%-ish. So now I've got this wider surface, larger surface, and I can make a bunch of duplicates of these proteins docking. And so from here, let's go ahead and duplicate that. I'm going to, I'll just close all this up. So we've got our animation working beautifully. I want to clone this docking protein group so that it clones over the entire surface of the cell. So I'll use a cloner and clone this docking protein. I'll tell the cloner to clone as under the object tab as an object cloner, and then I will use my cell surface as the object it's cloning to. So you can see that it's duplicated that protein docking animation group over the entire cell surface now. And it's obviously not rotated correctly, right? So I want to come into my cloner, and we could try unchecking align clone, but then these are just now all aligned vertically, right? So it's not aligning it to the surface. But what we need to do now is come into transform and just rotate this minus 90. And then now they're all going to be facing up. Well, I don't know why it's set up to work this way, but that's just part of MoGraph. So you can see all the animations happening now. I'm going to play around with the object tab and just manipulate the seed a little bit. Like, I kind of like the production the way it looks here. Maybe I'll just try adding a few more and see how that feels. Yeah. So if you're not happy with the way your animation works or your distribution looks, you can always come in here and just change the seed. And that's going to randomly put them in different positions. And in some of these, you're going to see some overlap of your objects. Like, let's choose this one just as an example. So you can see these two are actually overlapping. And there's a way we can fix that. So I've got quite a few of these happening on the surface now. Let's go ahead and fix that overlap. To do that, I'm going to select my cloner. I'm going to come up to MoGraph Effector, and I'm going to use the Push Apart effector. Push Apart gives you some control over how close things can be to each other, how close the clones can be to each other. And so I can change the radius, right? And that's going to push them apart, and it's going to completely ignore the surface of the object. But if I just change it a little bit bigger, right, just like 40 centimeters, I can come in so that these that are almost touching are going to be pushed apart. So that's a nice feature. So you can control both the strength and the amount and how many iterations. So that's the first effector I'm going to put on there. The second effector I'm going to put on is a rotational effector. So we're going to say, and I'm going to use a random. So MoGraph effector random. And all I want to do is control under parameter, not the position, but the rotation. And I only want to control the heading, right? So 360 in the heading. Now each of these is randomly rotated at a different rotation angle in the heading. The reason I did that is I have this little wobble right component. And if I don't have that selected, like if I don't have that random, they're all going to be wobbling at exactly the same rate and coming down, and it looks very fake. So just turning on a little bit of randomization creates a little bit of differentiation in each one. So they're not coming down at the same time. The second, I mean, they are coming down at the same time, so they're not rotated at the same angle. The second or third thing I want to do now is control the timing. And we're going to control the timing of our animation with another random effector. So I'm selecting my cloner, going to MoGraph effector random. And in this case, I don't want position or anything, no rotation, no scale. The only thing I want to control is time offset. So I can control this time offset, and you can see it's already working. Uh, I usually do about the same length as my animation. So like that was 120 frame animation, and now there's 120 frame in variation, right? So these are coming in at different rates based on that. They still feel a little bit too uniform to me, actually. So I'm going to change it. I'm going to make it maybe 60 frames. Now we've got them all coming in kind of closer together, right? So the more you have in here, the farther apart that change is going to be. So I don't know. Let's try 90 and see how that feels. 90 feels pretty good to me. I'll zoom in here and pretend this is going to be my hero animation. But you can see that, that makes a nice randomization, right? So we've got these all coming in at different times and docking on this protein surface. So that is very, very nice. One thing to note about this random effector is that it only works well on things that are actually animated in the group versus like tags. So I've tried doing this with, rather than using like a bulge deformer, I've tried doing things like a pose morph tag. For whatever reason, the timing on the tag gets offset. So as long as you have all of your animated components happening within a group and on the actual objects, it tends to work just fine, right? So the change as it docks is the same across the board. I think I'm happy with this. I'm going to use this as my animation. So what I want to do is start setting up my framing now, right? So just one more time, I'm going to play through the entire animation and see how it feels. And I think what I might do is like a rack focus on these. And so I think what I'm going to do is take my protein docking animation and just pull this all out a little bit so that we've got all of these more centered in our frame length, right? So there's not going to be anything happening until about right here. And then there should be more things happening too towards the end. If you're not, it's kind of ending all kind of at this too quickly to me. So I think I'm gonna make some more changes to this time offset. And what I might do is actually just change the seed and increase the time offset another little bit. Right, so we've got them happening pretty soon here, and then we should have some more happening towards the end. Yeah, and that's what I was looking for. Okay, so I wanted this 450 frame animation, and I wanted to be able to control some of the timing in here like that. So what I'm going to do is there's a couple options I have. Like I could choose to make a hero character, right? So I can either use the randomization functions here and just choose one to focus on, or I could create my own sort of hero character. So right now I'm going to move on to framing this animation. So the animation is finished. We're going to work on the framing with our camera. So let's make a camera and look through that camera, and we'll set up what we want our initial scene to be. So I'm just playing through to see. I think I'm going to use this one right here as my uh, zoom in focal point towards the end. So as this one's docking right here, this will be I want to be framed in pretty close to that one. So right before that happens, I want to make sure I'm framed in to see that. If you need help with your framing, you can actually come into your camera here under display and turn on the grid. and this will give you the 3x3 grid. You can change the grid, right? You can also use all these other types of tools, triangles and golden section, if that's helpful to you. I like using the 3x3 grid because it gives me a good feeling for, you know, where to look and um, how to get that really nice framing. So I think this feels pretty good. We'll have this come in and dock. Cool. So I'm going to say I'm going to have my camera ending right here at this spot. So I'll just make sure my camera is selected, keyframe it. And then before this, at the beginning of our animation, I just want to be pulled back, right? So I'm seeing this happen, but I'm kind of like pushing into this one particular protein. And maybe I'll add just a slight rotation in there. And I'm not too concerned about those um, proteins out in the background that are floating around because I'm going to be using some shallow depth of field. And I really think a lot of those will disappear. If not, we can work on how to fix that. So here's our camera motion so far. We've just got a subtle, slow push in where we're seeing things happen. And we're going to focus in on this one ducking. And then that'll be the end of our animation. We'll just fade out from there. So pretty simple. One thing I do like to do sometimes with my cameras is just to add a subtle little bit of shake on there. And to do that, you can use an animation vibrate tag on your camera and just on the vibrate tag, choose enable position. And we'll do just a very slight, like maybe 10 by 10 by 10 and make it very subtle. So frequency, I like to make really, like right now, it's going to feel annoying, right? So we're really vibrating a lot. But if I change the frequency to be like 0.2, right? We're zooming in on this one. And we've just got a slow, subtle sort of motion. I think it's moving too much still. So I'm just going to change this to like 8 by 8 by 8. So it's just a way to get some really easy camera shake in your shots. Makes it feel a little more handheld. Adds a little bit more. So when your camera gets to a spot like this where you're stopping, right? So it adds a little bit of. Okay, so I'm gonna just reframe my camera a little bit to work with that. First thing I could do is actually change the seed. That actually did it. I was gonna reframe it a little bit. So let's set up a focus object. We're gonna use a null, call it focus. In our camera, under the optical tab, I'm going to drag my focus in there. So my camera is always going to be focused on this point. So let's stop looking through my camera. I'm trying to get a visual on which guy we're focusing on. Actually, it's that one. And I need to move my focus around to match it. So I think it was this one. Yeah. So I just want to make sure my focus is on this when it's seated. That should be good. Now we can look back to our camera, turn on the IPR, and just, I don't care about any of the lighting thing right now. I just want to set up my camera's focal blurriness. So we're going to have bokeh turned on. I'm under optical. We're going to bokeh turned on, and I'm going to say 1 and see how that feels. It's going to need to be a lot more, so 0.5, maybe 0.8. 2, 25. I'm kind of digging that. All right, so I want to see this one very clearly in focus. And the others, as I pull back to the beginning, I think I'm going to reduce that amount of blurriness. It's actually reducing naturally for me. And I can see, going to have to do something with these objects in the background to make them do something beforehand. So that's pretty simple to do. I think I'm going to just go ahead and um, continue that animation so that it's much higher. So we'll have to temporarily zoom out here. And I'm going to make a keyframe here at 0. Since I've moved these up, it helps a lot. But I'm going to take this docking protein and at 0, stop looking through the camera, make this just a lot higher, like way, way higher. And then I can actually take this keyframe and pull it out prior to my animation starting so that those don't feel overly quick as they're moving in. Let's see how that feels while we're looking through the camera. So now we don't see those molecules or those proteins sort of hiding up there in the background. They're not dangling in space before they get started. So that fixes that for us. All right, now that we got our animation set up and everything's looking good, let's go ahead and set up our lighting so we have something to look at our materials with. And so I want to create initially just a dome light. So I'm going to come in here and say dome light. And let's go ahead and turn on our Redshift IPR. So you can see the dome light just gives this even background. We can come back here earlier in our scene and you'll see it's washed out a little bit. I'm going to open up our asset browser and in the HDRI folder, so I'm just under all HDRIs, I'm going to grab something that's well lit, like a bright room. So I like this studio apartment, empty apartment. It seems like a nice one to start with. So I'm just going to drag that into my texture slot on my dome light. That looks pretty nice. So let's go in and create some materials as well. So I think I'll come in here to where we're sort of zoomed in to our main character, and so we can see some stuff in the background as well. I'm just going to create my own materials for this. So let's go ahead and pop this over so we can see our material browser a little bit better. And we'll say create material, and we'll just create a standard material. And this one we will call cell. And let's duplicate that one twice. And this one we'll call surface protein. And this one we'll call docking protein. Cool. And we can just place now each of these on there. So cell is going to go on our cell surface. This is going to go on our surface protein, and this is going to go on our spheres. So great. I mean, Redshift already makes something that looks beautiful. We haven't even really done anything. So I love the reflective qualities that are happening in here. I think I'm going to take that away. I'm going to leave it on the cell surface, but I'm going to take it away from the proteins a little bit. So let's first work on our surface protein. I think, actually, no, let's work on our cell first. I want a kind of a blue environment, so we can just use the standard work area here color. So we'll do like sort of a medium blue for our color. And let's go ahead and add in a little bit of roughness in that reflection so it comes in with very little. We'll just pop it up to 0.5. So still has the reflection, but it's a little softer. For our surface protein, I think I'm going to go more of a beigey sort of color. And also add in a little bit of roughness in there. So let's say 0.5. I love this sort of waxy feel that they have. And then for our docking protein, I think I might go towards more of the minty green sort of feel. So you just change it depending on what your animation requires. Let's see. Yeah, no, I like that. Minty green. And we'll see how it feels when we're a little closer. Okay. So I'll go ahead and leave that one a little shiny. So you don't, I mean, to get a nice quality animation, you really don't have to spend all that much time. I think what I might do is play around now with our rotation of our dome light. So because we just put that dome light in and it's already got pretty decent lighting, I can decide if I want to have more typical lighting, like typical top left sort of lighting. I'm just rotating the entire thing, right? I obviously don't want that background to show up in there. We can also decide, like maybe we want the lighting, but we don't want to use the background at all, right? So I could keep rotating this around and get this blown out sort of lighting, or I could rotate this back a little bit more and have more backlighting, which I think looks kind of nice. I'm actually liking that quite a bit. I think I might just throw in one more light. Let's just do an area light. I'm going to put it up here to the front right. So I'll stop looking through my camera for a moment and zoom back in. Oops, got a little bit confused here. Okay, zoom back in. I'll pull this up here. I just want to add a little more color, I think, into the lighting. So I'm just scaling up the light so it has a greater effect. And rotate it down a little. And let's look through the camera and I will make some additional changes there. So I think I'm going to change this light to be a little bit more towards the warm tones. And I'll go ahead and turn down the intensity to like 60 or so, maybe 50. Yeah, I'm really liking the way that this is feeling now. I do think I want it to kind of increase the dramatic effect of that depth of field. And so I'm going to have it change a little bit over time. So I'm going to have it as we actually get here to our object, I'm going to have the depth of field change a little bit. So under my camera, I'm going to change this. I'm going to keyframe my aperture and then I'm going to come back to the beginning here and I'm just going to tone it down slightly. So 0.5, maybe 0.6 and keyframe that. I just feel like I wanted it to be a little bit more sharp, pardon me, up front. And as we get closer, it has a little bit more dramatic depth of field. Yeah. Okay. So very simple animation. Let's go ahead and save it out. We'll set up our render settings. And so I've got some special render settings in here, but I'll go ahead and set them up again here. I'm going to set up Redshift. Um, so the thing I like to do first is to set it for low. And then under the advanced tab, so we're going to set it under low. We're going to turn on denoising. And under the, we're going to select hardware tracing if available. And then under the advanced tab, I'm going to come in and say, right now the threshold is 0.1. I'm going to turn it like 1 is there, 0.15. 0.1, that's actually why we selected this basic tab. Putting on low puts it on 0.1. And so, let's see, we want to say, do not generate random noise patterns. Under denoising, we're going to say optics is great. And then under global illumination, I'm going to say brute force for both of these. And all of this work is going to have the effect of speeding up our render times so that they're pretty quick. So under our output, I'm going to say all frames. Make sure we're looking through our camera and set up our JPEG renders and put them in our protein docking folder, new folder, PD rendered frames. Stopping this for just a second. I don't think I set up my output correctly yet. I didn't set up 1920 by 1080. Save our animation and we'll render this and I will show you the finished results and we'll wrap it up. So now our animation has rendered out completely and I want to take this out of here. I'll play through it quickly or scrub through it in the Cinema 4D render view, picture viewer. So you can see the animation has completely finished rendering. I want to take it out of here and manipulate it a little bit further before I'm going to call this completed. And I'm going to do that in After Effects. So let's switch over to After Effects and go ahead and import the frames that we just rendered out. And I've got those saved right here. So I just need to select the first one and make sure that importer JPEG sequence is selected. That'll import that as video, and then I could just drag this into the new composition from selection feature there. And really, I just want to do a couple simple things. Mostly what I want to do is I want to add a little bit of motion blur. So uh, the way that we do that is to just go to our effects presets and I'm going to type in pixel. And there is a pixel motion blur under the time function. And I'll drag that onto our object. And that's going to make our playback a little bit slower, but it will actually add a little bit of motion blur to that. We can increase the number of shutter samples if we feel like it, but I think for our purposes, this is going to work just fine. The second thing I want to do is to just pump up the contrast a little bit. So I'm going to come to this end spot and I'm going to use the curves function. So right click that, drag it over, and I'm just going to pull this down and pull this up just to add a little bit more contrast in there. I feel like it just needs a little bit more. So here is before and here is after. So you can see that it adds quite a bit of difference in there. The last thing I want to do to this is to go ahead and add a little bit of color treatment. And so I'm going to come in and add a layer back here. I'll use my close-in shot, and then I'm going to add two solid layers in here. And the first one is going to be orange. So I'm going to have an orange and teal sort of effect on top of this. So I'm going to say layer, new, solid layer, and I want to choose an orange color, hit OK. And I'm just going to use my pen tool. I'm going to zoom out slightly and use my pen tool to create a shape that's similar to my cell curve in the background. It doesn't have to be exact, but it's going to be much bigger than our background. And we can move this around a little bit if we need to. So I'll just reposition it. And we could change that curve as well. I think I'm going to do that. Sometimes getting a hold of these control points is really fun. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And what I want to do here is come under my masks and feather this so that it's soft. And under my mode, I'm going to change this to add. So it's going to be blowing it out incredibly at first. So I just want to change the opacity of this layer down to be much less opaque. So we're just going to slightly add in a little bit of orange. And I want it to kind of blow it out a little bit. I'm just trying to mimic a little some sort of light in the background. I'm going to do the opposite for our front section. I'm going to say layer, new, solid. And for this one, I'm going to be doing more of a teal color, so kind of a dark teal. And I'll do a similar thing here where I will create um, an outside path that's much larger that I can manipulate and move around. And for this one, I think I'm going to change my layer mode to overlay. So it just has a little bit of treatment to it. And then into my mask, I'll also feather this mask. And again, I'm going to change my opacity of this layer so that it's not quite so much. It's just barely treating it. It just adds a little bit something. This is a way you can always come in and make some changes to your piece before you have a final version. So I just like the way that that appears much more. It feels a little bit more glowing. So I'll go ahead and set this up to render. Everything looks good. We'll render this out. So I hope this has been helpful for you. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in a future video.